The UFC has been running the same playbook for 15 years. It works every time. And you keep falling for it not because you're unsophisticated, but because the UFC is genuinely excellent at what it does, and part of what it does is make you feel like the hype you're receiving is organic rather than engineered. Here's the playbook, and the names attached to it are real. How the hype build actually works. The UFC's matchmaking process is not primarily about finding the best possible fights at any given moment. It is about sequencing fights in a way that maximizes commercial value over time. The best possible fight right now might destroy a marketable star before his audience has grown large enough to justify a major pay-per-view. The best fight for the business is the fight that happens at the right moment, when the crowd is big enough, when the story is built, and when the outcome serves a longer narrative, whether the promoted fighter wins or loses. Paddy Pimblett is the clearest ongoing example of this system operating at full visibility. When Pimblett arrived in the UFC in 2021, he was one of the most socially followed fighters the promotion had signed in years. The Liverpool fan base, the media personality, the specific kind of charisma that generates content between fights. The UFC identified all of it immediately and made a set of decisions that had almost nothing to do with Pimblett's actual ranking or his readiness to face top 10 opposition. His first 6 UFC opponents, Luigi Vendramini, Rodrigo Vargas, Jordan Levitt, Jared Gordon, Tony Ferguson, and Bobby Green. The narrative around each of these fights was presented as Pimblett proving himself, building towards something. What the matchmaking record actually shows is a sequence of opponents selected for specific outcomes, for either complementing Pimblett's style in a way likely to produce highlights, or for being past prime names that add perceived credibility while minimizing genuine risk. Jared Gordon was the closest thing to a real test in the sequence. Many at ringside believed Gordon won that fight. The split decision went to Pimblett. Gordon told the media he had absolutely won. The outcome served the promotion. It is documented and agreed upon that the fight was competitive. The promotion that benefits most from one result got that result. The tells. You can identify a hype build in progress by watching for specific tells in how the UFC frames the fighter and sequences the matchmaking. The first tell is accelerated media positioning before the fighting record justifies it. When a fighter is appearing in pre-fight press conferences and featured slots, getting extended post-fight interview time, and generating UFC-branded content packages before they have cracked the top 15 in any legitimate ranking, the promotion has decided they are an asset to develop regardless of where the merit would place them. Bo Nickal entered the UFC in 2023 as the most decorated amateur wrestler in recent MMA history. His combat sports credentials were real. His matchmaking was something else. His first 4 opponents had a combined UFC record of approximately 5-9. By his 5th fight, Nickal was being positioned as a potential middleweight contender, in a division he had never been tested in at any level below the UFC's most carefully managed threshold. The promotional framing around Nickal identified him as the future of the division before he had faced anyone capable of exposing what the future of the division needs to be able to handle. That gap between the story and the evidence is where the setup lives. The second tell is when the promotion uses a loss to advance the story rather than step back from it. Pimblett's fight with Chandler was the test. He won it, impressively, in a fight where Chandler had genuine moments of control. That result has changed the calculation. Pimblett may be a legitimate contender regardless of how the matchmaking around him operated. But the point is that the audience was never given an honest assessment of the evidence. They were given a narrative that the matchmaking was designed to protect. When the setup ends. The setup ends in one of 2 ways. The first is that the fighter succeeds at the level the hype implied they would reach, and the hype was, in retrospect, accurate. This happens. The UFC's promotional investment in a fighter sometimes reflects a genuine assessment of their potential, amplified rather than fabricated. Jon Jones was never protected the way some fighters were protected. The promotion invested in him because the evidence supported the investment, and the evidence kept compounding. The second is that the fighter meets the first genuinely unmanaged opponent on their trajectory, and the carefully constructed record is exposed in a single night. This has a specific name inside the sport. It's called finding out. And the fighters who find out on pay-per-view cards, in front of the largest audience the promotion could assemble for them, generate exactly as much value for the UFC as the fighters who succeed. A hype train that gets derailed at the right moment is still monetized, sometimes more effectively than one that arrives. The current fighter. Everyone is hyping right now. whoever that is when you're watching this, is at one of these two moments. They are either approaching the point where the protection falls away and we find out whether the hype was real, or they are being managed toward a specific outcome that serves a commercial calendar that has nothing to do with sporting merit. The way you tell the difference is not by watching the fights. It is by watching the matchmaking. Who is being avoided? What the ranking math actually says versus where the promotional infrastructure is pointing. And what the UFC's recent promotional investment in this specific fighter looks like compared to fighters with comparable records who are not receiving the same level of amplification. The framework. Who have they beaten, and what were those opponents' records at the time of the fight? Not what their records are now. Fighters win and lose after a specific matchup, but at the precise moment they stepped into the cage with the hyped prospect. A fighter who was 8-3 when beaten looks different from a fighter who was 3-8. Have they been put in a fight where they were the underdog by any measurable metric, style, size, experience, or ranking? Or has every fight been structured as a situation they were favored to win, presented to the audience as a test while being managed to minimize genuine risk? What does the post-fight media positioning look like relative to the actual performance? Is the UFC amplifying highlights from a competitive fight as if it were dominant? Is a close decision being presented as a statement win while the opponent's team publicly disputes the scoring? Has the promotion booked them against someone who has beaten people the hyped fighter hasn't? Or is the trajectory a careful sideways movement through a sequence of complementary stylistic matchups that maintains the appearance of progress without the substance of it? And the most revealing question of all, who in the division is the hyped fighter conspicuously not being booked against? The absence in a matchmaking record tells you more than the presences. A managed trajectory is defined not just by who gets put in front of the prospect, but by who is quietly kept away from them until the moment is commercially optimal to make the fight. None of these questions require you to assume bad faith on the part of the UFC. The organization has a legitimate interest in developing marketable stars. Protecting assets during development is a normal business practice in any entertainment industry. But the audience deserves to understand that the story being sold and the competitive reality of where a fighter actually stands are not always the same document. The fighter everyone is hyping right now is either being set up for a breakthrough or being set up for a fall. The matchmaking record tells you which. Most people aren't reading it. Subscribe if you want to.